Okay, everybody, we have about a minute to go between the top of the hour or until the top of the hour. So I see people are starting to now pop in a little bit quicker. So just going to wait another minute or two so we get everybody on who wants to be on. Hi, Mandy. Guys, feel free to pop your faces on and say hi if you want to as well.
Yeah, or if you want to wave or anything. Well, no, I wish I could see everybody while I was presenting, but my screen goes to the.
Oh yeah, you do the presenter screen. Hey, Femi. Shirley, Mandy, is it Zentara?
Yes, it's Zentara.
Zentara. So Mandy works with Jessie Lopez, and she is who I met with to sort of brainstorm the coming session. So maybe Mandy, at the end, we can sort of talk about what we brainstormed. I don't know if you and Jessie came up with some bullet points at this point yet.
We came up with some bullet points and highlights of direction for our 3 series.
For the next one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Well, we've got 19 people on. I'm going to give it another 30 seconds and we'll get started. To those of you who are on and were on last week, this is part 2 of creating balance and integration in our personal and professional lives. So Shirley has joined us again to provide us with this excellent content. And Shirley, I think it's 3:01, so I will just hand it over to you. Get started. Hey, Jessie.
Right. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Amy, for the introduction and for having me again. So last month, we talked about the creating of balance in our life. And so today I've split it up because integration is really something different. And so I'm going to share my screen and we can, so you can see the slides as we go through as well. So what we talked about is that when you do some of the research on work-life balance, they're now calling it work-life integration ever since COVID. And when you do some of it, they're really talking about time management. And so what I was saying last month, and I'll repeat, is that I don't look at balance and integration as time management. I look at it as personal management. And so last month, we talked about the first part, which is how you have your inner balance. What's your inner climate? And how are you honoring that? And we talked about things like the window of tolerance, energy tanks, those types of things that help us notice and give us clues as to when we can make some changes. So today we're going to take that inner balance and talk about how do we integrate that into our lives? Like, how do we assess and bring our full intentions to what we do on the outside, or our outer climate, as it were? And I did give some homework last month, and so I'm curious if anyone did it, but just kind of, the homework was really to check in on yourself during the month and say, what are the questions that you can ask yourself to keep you on track? Just simple questions for yourself that will compel you to notice whether you're being healthy and whether or not you're managing stress and all of those different things. And so that was the first piece of homework. It's just for everyone to come up with their own questions, and we can all do that anytime. And then the other was just, what is one practice that helps you keep calm, or we would say above the line, in that place where you're living in curiosity and compassion and not judgment and fear. And one of the places where you understand how to fill your energy tanks, and you also notice what's depleting your energy tanks. And so we will talk a little bit about some of that today, but if you did not attend last month or watch the recording, it's fine. You will hopefully still be able to get everything out. And Amy will stop me if you do have questions where you want some clarification. Put them in the chat and she will interrupt at any time, as any of you can. Actually, this is set up as a meeting, so anybody can unmute and talk whenever you would like. That's fine as well. So moving to the integration was, we talked about the inner climate and how we balance. What's your outer climate? So what is the world around you bringing to you? Like, what are your stressors? What kind of demands do you have on you? What's your work environment like, or your home environment? You know, the people that you deal with. What kind of competing commitments do you have? You know, and competing commitments are often those things that we don't even recognize. We're not doing something because something else is holding us back. And so those are all things that are happening around us. And so what's that like for you? I mean, and I'll just kind of take a moment so you can have a little bit of self-reflection and just think about what is going on in your world right now that's causing the temperature to rise. You know, that's giving you challenges that are difficult, or that are taking a lot of your energy. And then as you kind of think about those for a moment, you know, the real question is, like, how do you want to show up? You know, what intentions can you set that like honor and support you, that they support your inner balance or your well-being, the part of you that's important to keep. You know, we talked a lot about getting back to homeostasis, you know, how the body will level out. Like, we can be stressed, but then we come back to calm, you know, and we always come back to that point. So while we know we're going to be fluid, you know, between stress and maybe even sometimes downtime, what keeps you at that healthy point? And so as we think about how we want to show up, what intention do you want to put into that? You know, the personal part, like who you are, your essence, your authentic self, how much of that is important for you to have show up every day? And what does that mean to the way your energy tanks are filled or depleted? Your relationships, you know, your interactions with people, your communication, you know, how would you like people to describe you? And the boundaries that you might have with all relationships, you know, whether it be work or personal, social, all of that. And then just at work in general, productivity as a value, as a collaborator, like, how do you maintain the balance and be at your best is really what we want to talk about. And it all starts with a strong foundation. So if you think about this iceberg, I know the iceberg gets used for a lot of different reasons, what we see, what we don't see. We think about, you know, the part of the iceberg that we don't see, and that is your foundation. That really is who you are. It's everything you think and you feel, your experience, your purpose, values, identity. It's your true self. So let's just, you know, imagine for this presentation today that iceberg, everything underwater is you, okay? And above the surface is everything that is seen, everything that you have to deal with. Like I said, how you show up, how you treat others, how you honor yourself, how people view you, honoring yourself, you know, that part of you that's a leader, and that others may follow your example. So often, you know, when we show up in the real world with real issues, a lot of who we are gets left behind. And so we really want to look at what is that unseen and how does that inner balance show up with everything that we do. So, you know, again, as we talked about last month, and, you know, we talked about the window of tolerance. I do want to just cover that in case you weren't on the call, because part of this seeing ourselves and recognizing the strong foundation is knowing when we need more. And the window of tolerance basically is, here's our window every day, and here are all the things that go on. And if our window of tolerance is open enough, as spikes happen, we're able to deal with them. And occasionally, you know, we'll get something thrown at us that takes us off track. But if we're not challenging our energy the way that we should in looking at it, or we're not taking care of ourselves physically or mentally, the window tends to close. And when it closes, those same things that happen every day start to fall outside of our window, which means we are not showing up and we're not handling them in the way that we would like. And so, again, if anybody later on wants to double check with me on that, I'm happy to share, and the slides were available as well as the recording. And so in our character, who is that? What is it that we want to make sure we are true to? So how do we do that? How do we integrate the inner balance with the outside world? And the first thing is just taking a look at ourselves from a full perspective, being self-aware. Because when we're self-aware, when we're noticing what's going on, that is the place where everything starts. Whether it's how you lead, how you interact, all of that, it always starts with that self-awareness, so that you can be ready to deal with whatever comes up that day. So you take a look at that, your outer client. Where's your attention, right? Are you present? Are you able to shift focus as required? And also, are you able to pause when necessary? We talked about that last month as well. Just that moment of pause in the middle of something happening where you want to react, that moment of pause is providing a new pattern for your neurons in the brain, even if it's just a 2-second pause, right? What we want to do is a break cycle of anything that brings us a lot of stress or causes us to react too heavily. So what you can control and influence, what are you aware of there? And most importantly, what is out of your control? What is out of your control, don't waste time or energy on it, and so really having your awareness on, I can influence this, I can make a difference here, or I can change this. But when it's somebody else's reaction, or it's something that is handed down that you have no way of adapting or adjusting, you adapt to it and you find ways to deal with it. So critical thinking, this can encompass a whole lot, and I do a lot of discussion on critical thinking, but today we're really just going to talk a little aspect of critical thinking, how your choices align with what is healthy for you, how your inner well-being, how your choices are aligning with that. And when they don't, we're going to talk about a tool that you can use to kind of help you think through some of these things. Your space, when your boundaries are being tested, and we're going to talk about boundaries as well. And then also your mindset, being open and curious, knowing what you love, and choices that support your growth, and again, this goes back to energy management. Is your mindset in a place where you are feeling, where you're feeling up, where you're above that line? Or is your mindset in that victim role? Remember the slide of the hero and the victim. Are we in the victim category where our mindset is, oh no, it's all coming at me? Or are we in that hero mindset where we're like, this is something I need to solve, or I need to take care of, or I need to look into? So again, bringing your inner self to the world means paying attention to all these things. And we're going to talk about the last 3 of these in a little bit more detail. So choices and options. Okay, so we know the perfect world doesn't exist. And so we often look at our choices as either or, either I stay late at work and do this, or I go home and then my family's happy, I've made dinner, or either or, these types of things. So the goal here is not that we solve these problems. The goal is not to get stuck in them, and to always look for ways that kind of align in how we can balance them, and how we can articulate even what options that we have, so that we can look at things not as either or, but either and. And when you take the time to work on your inner balance, and whether it's your breathing, your walk in the woods, reading a book, listening to music, whatever, any of those takeaways that you have had over our past sessions, when you take the time for that, a lot of this comes a lot easier for you. So here we go. Here's the choice. This is, I'm going to walk you through a polarity management tool, and you won't really need to go deep into what the polarities are. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to use this as a tool today because, is it always one way or the other? Do we have to choose between? And when we use a tool like this, it's going to help us identify and also articulate so that we are conscious of the things that might be red flags for us. And we're also far more able to understand what it would take to balance between two different things. And what shows up in these two ovals, I'm going to go through an example and we'll talk about a couple other things, but it could be any type of polarity in your life. And I can give you resources if anyone's interested in knowing more about polarities, but just to use this tool. So the first thing we want to do is change this to an and, right? So it's consider how would this and this work? And so we add now the arrows because the arrow really demonstrate kind of the decision flow that we have with different circumstances. Because there is no, when we say, oh, I'm between a rock and a hard place, we have like two tough decisions to make or two things to choose from. What we want to look at, okay, is what is positive from each one and what is negative from each one. And when I say positive and negative, it's the results that would come from this. And this example is, activity and rest, right? So what are the positive results that would come from activity? And, if we were in a room together right now, I'd be whiteboarding them and I'd be asking, I'd be like, what are positive results? So just, kind of think through a few on your own. And what are the positive results that come from focusing on rest? And that one is also pretty easy too, right? We get renewed, those kinds of things. But what's important when doing this exercise is looking at what are the negative results from too much focus on this? So, what did they say? All work and no play makes Jane a dull girl or something, from that old saying. But it's more than that. It's like what can happen to us if we do too much activity. And also what happens if we do too much rest. We can also look at, here's another one with work and home. What's the positive results if we focus on work? Or the positive results if we just focus on home. There's positive results from each. And we want to highlight those when we're doing this kind of thing. So, I can give you, as we think about this, I'll just give you through a lot of what we would call polarities, when they seem to be at odds with each other. I remember back when I was in the mortgage industry, it was all about, do we centralize operations or do we put them out in the branches? Back before technology was quite as big as it is today. But those kinds of questions, came up, and there's good about each. And so again, you're using this tool not to solve a problem. This is not a problem solving tool. It's a balancing tool. It's the way to look at it. So sometimes you could say, what's the polarity between desiring more or appreciating what is? Okay. Focusing on yourself, focusing on others, hope versus reality, responsibility versus forgiveness, stability versus change. So, we can look at this whenever we have that kind of decisioning to make and find ways to make what we have in front of us work for us, where we can bring what's important forward and try to avoid what doesn't work. And so let's take the activity and rest one, and we're going to dig into this one a little bit later. What you'll see here now is an arrow up and an arrow down. And so when you do the exercise, the arrow up says healthy life. So why are we doing this exercise at all? It's because we want to have a healthy life. So we want to balance our activity and our rest. And what happens? What's our fear that something will happen if we don't balance these? And it's an unhealthy life. So this is what I would call a fairly simple one to go through. So, what's positive? What are the positive results if we focus on activity, right? Well, mental activity keeps our minds sharp. physical activity keeps our bodies sharp and toned, you know, and you get stimulated with change, right? We produce things and we provide services. It gives us a sense of accomplishment. You know, we build relationships through collaboration and competition because we're out there doing things. We meet new people, opportunities expand. So there's just a lot of things that we can talk about that are on the positive side of activity. So, and if we look at the positive side of rest, it's very similar, like your mind gets a chance to gain new perspectives, you get to rejuvenate your muscles, you know, relax, get refreshed. You know, you can sometimes just let yourself be without the pressure to perform, you know, develop contentment, you know, so you get recharged. All those things are also great about rest. What's really important now is to look at what we put on the bottom side of this exercise sheet. And that is what happens if we over focus on either of the polarities that we're looking at. So if we over focus on activity, what can happen? You know, our minds can get overloaded, we can get headaches, forget things, we get exhausted, might physically get injuries, you know, and start to ache. We could get tense, we get overwhelmed, you know, run down, quality of work changes, we could become irritable, you know, all those different things. And you just kind of brainstorm as much of a list as possible. And the more you can put on the list, the better. And I'll explain in just a minute why. And again, we can go through the rest again too. What happens? Your mind becomes dull. You can even lose your mind if you're resting too much, right? Your muscles deteriorate, you get flabby, you know, you don't have the stimulation that you would, and you can actually lose energy by having too much rest. And so again, going through this list, and so you have to find your own balance in everything that we do. But the question here is, when does something good for you become unhealthy or even toxic at times? And so, you know, as we look at this, you know, I've kind of put this together in a sheet. It's just, you know, fill in your own, you know, like fill in your own. What are the things that you're trying to balance between that show up in your world? And how can you look at the positives, right? And how can you understand when something's no longer healthy? And that's really where it's an important, you know, you put the why on top. It's like, why is this important to me? Why do I want to do this? And what am I afraid of that isn't going to happen? And so you just, sorry. And so you just work through this. For anything, you can do is as many of these as you want. But the important part of doing this exercise is noticing what you put in the bottom quadrants, right? Those become red flags. When you start becoming exhausted from too much activity or too much work or whatever it is, or what any of those, you know, things start to show up in your life, that's when you look at the energy shift and going, okay, this is now my prompt. This is now a trigger. I am noticing this. I wrote this down. This is one of the things in the bottom quadrant. This is where I don't want to go. This is not how I want to show up. This is not how I want to handle this situation. This is not how I want to lead. This is not how I want to interact. Whatever are the two things that you used, you can now have it clear so that your brain can react to something that you have written down, that you can clearly articulate is a flag. It doesn't mean that in that moment you can't hang out doing what you're doing. It's just saying, okay, I've got to make a change. I don't want to get stuck in this spot. I need to move on. I need to get some of what's on the other side, or I need to produce what is on the other side, because I am too much down in this bottom quadrant. So again, a great tool. If anyone has any questions on that, feel free to chime in or ask, and I will also be happy to answer some at the end. So again, it's a small part of critical thinking, but it's a way to think about what you need to balance in your life. So the next thing I'd like to kind of share is thinking about boundaries, and we talk about our own space. And when we're in the outside world, we're not in that meditative, I'm taking a walk, I'm by myself mode. We're now dealing with real things. It's also really important to understand if you have gone past a point that is no longer healthy for you. So kind of think of boundaries as rules of engagement for yourself. How do I want to engage with other people? And putting up rules engagement, it's a lot like if you're developing something within your organization and you're maybe redoing a mission statement, or you're on a project and you're looking forward to something and you're putting some marketing materials together. You have to sit down and think about it. And healthy boundaries is the same way. It really requires you to know what your preferences are, what your limits are, what you can take, and what your deal breakers are, because sometimes we have a zone that we're okay in, but what absolutely is the deal breaker for you? And just having those front of mind really help you with the way that you interact and the way you make decisions about your day, your week, even your career. So it's also really important, because here's the thing that we don't always think about, but when you have boundaries and you're able to communicate them effectively, or when you need to, it's the truth, right? It's your truth. It's your truth about how you feel about something. And sharing that actually allows people to get to know you. Because when you don't share that, people don't know you. So setting boundaries, sometimes people think it's a negative, it holds people off. What it really does is it can draw people in, right? Because they understand that about you. I mean, you might have friends that say, oh, don't ever go there with them on this one, because you know that about them, but it's something And so think about the boundaries that you might currently have in your work and personal life. And what's really important about that is, thinking about what conversations do you need to have around that, right? What might need to happen for you to allow people to know you better, and also for you to honor yourself more, and I'm just saying, and use language that supports those boundaries. And I know sometimes that's a difficult thing, because you want to be accommodating or whatever, but it's just things like, well, thank you, I'll have to check my calendar, or I'll need to sleep on that, and just finding, ways, or I need to check with somebody before I get back to you, so that you don't feel compelled that you have to answer everything immediately, when maybe you're not sure if that's crossing a line, or you want to give it some more thought. And the other thing about it is, a boundary is often sometimes just saying no to things, and you have to trust. You have to trust yourself when you have these conversations. That's why sometimes taking a break or stepping back is good, but it's not a bad thing to say no. And there's good language that you can use around that as well. And so, it's directly saying no is not a negative, right? It's just allowing people to get to know you. And there's a great exercise, and I'm going to credit Terry Cole for this, that helps you recognize or enforce your boundaries. And the first part of it is just when you feel a frustration, and I would actually say, write this down. What was the frustration? Okay. I was frustrated because ABC. And the next question that you ask yourself is, what was my feeling about that? Right? What was I feeling with that? Was I angry? Was I sad? And then the most important question here is, what was my underlying need? And this is such a great exercise to help you know, A, if you need to establish a boundary, B, if a boundary was crossed, or C, do I need to have a conversation? Because the underlying need that's the big question, right? What was not honored within me? What is something that I need to make sure that I am taken care of? Whether it's my need for autonomy, whether it's, it's my need for certainty on something, whether it's my, whatever it is that is uniquely you, that underlying need is what you want to have your boundaries set around. Okay. But where you don't have boundaries, it'll show up in frustration. I always love this quote: frustration is often a request unspoken. And it just is exactly that simple sometimes, even if you think about, your partner not emptying the dishwasher, did you ask them? And now we can get into what a clean request looks like, not saying like it was nice if the dishwasher would be emptied, because that's not a request, but this is the same kind of thing. Sometimes we think we're putting up boundaries and that we are communicating something when we're not being clear. So I don't think with this group I've ever done anything on that type of communication, but I also have a ton of information I can share with you on clean requests, should you ever want. And then the third of the three things I said I'd go into a little bit more is mindset. And, and being aware of your mindset, when you get up in the morning to when you go to bed at night, we have ebbs and flows throughout the day of how we're thinking or what our moods are, and they may change all of the time, but being aware of it so that when you are ready to have a conversation or when you are needing to do something, if you are in the best place for it. And mindset also has a lot to do with what your mental energy is at that moment, because sometimes you can sit down and do something very easily, and other times you struggle with it. It's just not the right time. It's like, if you're working from home, go put a load of laundry in or go do something, then come back, because sometimes our mindset needs to be adjusted. We need a break. And so, some of the questions around mindset, are, these that are coming up is just how much awareness and mindful action am I willing to bring? How do I want to show up? What do I love about my job? And, and that this is a good question to ask yourself, because most of us love something about our jobs. It may be 20% of our job, it may be 80% of our job, but most of us love something about our job. And when we love something about our job, we tend to excel at that particular piece of it. And when we excel at it, that actually, even though we're expending physical energy or maybe mental energy, it also brings us energy, because it might bring us, fulfillment, joy. So it may be filling, your emotional tank while it's expending something else. And so just kind of always watch that. And when you notice that, wow, you know what, like, I really love spreadsheets, and I just love the little bit of work I had to do today on the spreadsheet. I know that's crazy for some people, but if that's it, then when and how to do spreadsheets. You do them at a time when your mind is ready to focus on it. And if you're in sales and you're out and about and you love talking to people and you're kind of in one of those moods, that's when you go and you try to do something else part of your job. So just really noticing what you love about your job, what brings you energy, what opens you up, and when you're not in that space, what your mindset is. And, the last question here, am I being curious or judgmental? We kind of talked about that with hero and victory, the above the line, below the line. If you notice in your language, when we're being judgmental, especially we get judgmental about ourselves. I can't believe I didn't do that. Or, instead of being curious. And curious would look something like, I wonder how I could do that better next time. Or I wonder how I could make more calls next time. And it's more about how we can improve going forward and not judging. And I know, when I was managing a wholesale group years ago, I'll never forget this. A couple of people came and they had some issues with something that I was leading on. And I just went home and I thought, I can't believe I didn't notice that in myself. I can't believe they had to come to tell me. And I just went in a spiral going down with judgment. And I went home and sat and thought about it. And I said, okay, now what am I going to do about it? And the next day I came in, wrote a memo, said, here, we're going to make some changes. Da, da. And immediately, even before I put the memo out, the moment I went into what am I going to do about it mode, my mindset improved, my attitude improved, and how I looked at my role of that particular moment in time. Because I thought about it at the time, and I forever will remember, I said, you can walk through anything and come out as long as you try. And so, so when we look at mindset and we look at our choices and we look at how we think through our boundaries, those are all the things that will allow us to bring ourselves into the world fully integrated. And so with that, okay, now we are ready to talk about work-life integration in the way that I put the line through in the beginning. Because back to this picture, like I said, everything was about time management and, how you walk your dog on your lunch hour and you're integrating all these things and you can throw a load of laundry in and pick up the kids after school and then go back to work. And that is great. I mean, that's something that life is allowing us to do much more often. It's not what I wanted to share with you in these 2 sessions, but it is important now to look at that and say, if I am taking care of my well-being and my inner climate is healthy and calm and at a good temperature, and I am bringing that into the world, I'm integrating that into my personal life, my work life, my community, then I have the integration I want. Now I can talk about the choices around time management. Okay, so how often and whatever, which really seem far more like checklist kinds of things rather than big decisions when you get to this point. And so, like I said, when you recognize the energy that in what you love and you're making these healthy choices, and sometimes you can feel better and sometimes you can feel great about the foundation that you have set up for yourself so that you show up in the way that you want. And so that is the end of today's presentation. And as always, I thank you. And I think we have actually a couple minutes if there are any questions or if anybody wants to comment or talk. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but as I always say, feel free to reach out with questions. I can always send you supporting documentation on any of these things if there's something of interest, or if you just have some questions that you don't necessarily want to ask in this forum, you are very welcome to reach out to me and ask those. I am very happy to answer. So,
thank you, Shirley.
thank you.
Wow, so much of what you said today especially has resonated with me. And I think, I don't know if it's age, but I'm really trying now to listen to myself. But I know for years I was more of a people pleaser, and I don't know if that's from, many of us have childhood trauma or whatever, but I know that some of that can lead to, being more of a people pleaser type of person. And so what I'm finding now is that, all these things that I do a lot of times that I'm not comfortable, or it puts me out, or it makes me frustrated, that just being aware of it and saying, okay, well, yeah, this doesn't make me happy and I don't want to feel this way anymore. And instead of sort of band-aiding it and being like, oh, I'll get over it, I just really been doing that a lot lately. And it's really helped to get me into a better headspace. But it's really just figuring out what those things are. Right, Jessica, how do you get past the guilt to do things for yourself? I mean, I'll let Shirley take that. But I mean, this like sleeping with, I'm just going to be really honest, like sleeping with my husband because he snores, and it's not like I created my own bedroom. I mean, it's my office, but like this is my sanctuary. And it's because it's the one place that I have control out of my entire house with boys, and they just mess everything up. But like I can come in here and shut my door. And yeah, do I feel guilty sometimes that they're out there? Like, sure. But at the same time, I'm like this is what's making me happy right now. And they're fine. They're doing their own thing. And I don't know. I'm trying to do that more and more and more. So I really appreciate today's session, because it sort of gave me more tools and more things to focus on in that journey for me. So awesome.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I do want to address the guilt issue. The thing is, some of us were raised with intense guilt and others were not, but we all carry an amount of it. You have to think about guilt as something you almost leave behind as you go through layers of adult development, because, and I always go back to this very simple, you put your oxygen mask on first in the airplane, right? If you are able to stand back and put perspective on your life and how you serve and everything else, and you're able to realize how much more effective you can be for everyone around you, and that includes example setting. When you can have that kind of a perspective, it's a little easier to let go of guilt. But again, guilt, a lot of it's ingrained in us. And so, I feel guilty if I'm not doing something for somebody. It is a process of retraining your brain as well. You have to, step by step, when you feel guilt, just pause and go, this is for a greater good. And sometimes you have to have that why out in front of you, that motivator out in front of you, which is why it's always good to take some time and write things down or journal so that you can go back to them. But you have to recognize that your brain's been conditioned this way. So it will take you time to let go, but you can do it. You can slowly do it. When I call myself semi-retired, I couldn't sit still. And matter of fact, I got myself so busy right now again because it's me, but my husband kept saying, it's fine, you deserve this, you worked your whole life. But my guilt was like, I need to take care, I need to do. And I had to retrain. So yeah, it's a good, I don't know if there's other questions, Amy, but if there's not, I want to go back to something you said about noticing and having your space and all the things. And you said something about childhood as well.
Mm.
I'm also trained in something called the Enneagram. There's a lot of different things, but one of the things that was most important in that learning was that we develop our personalities around our greatest fears. And so a lot of what shows up to the outside world is a mask of who we really are. And so people were using, the word authentic self, and nobody really knew what that meant. But if you think about so much as what, like you said, you're people pleasing, whatever, what you think people want from you often, because that's what's going to get you the feedback or the accolades, or that's a good girl, good boy when you're little, all those things. You do what you think pleases others so often. And we've built our personalities around this. These whole last two sessions, I hope, will give you some motivation to kind of dig in deeper to say, really, who am I? What is the true essence of who I am? And how do I best show up in the world to be who I'm meant to be and to produce what I'm supposed to produce? And that is also a journey. I mean, all these things are journeys, right? And with these sessions, I've been
like, I'm 48. I'll figure it out when I'm 80, maybe. Because that's a really tough question. I mean, I ask myself that a lot. Someone says, what are your passions? What are you? And sometimes I just don't even know. I've got to really think. And that's sad to me. I feel like I should have more,
No.
I mean, I do love my job and I love my kids.
No, again, don't say being sad is judgment. Think about it as what else could I learn?
Right.
And how would that help me? And continual learning is great, but most people never even ask these questions. And I think we see that in the world. Most people don't want to self-reflect, and their stages of adult development get stuck at, one of the lower levels. And so while they may be promoted as manager or whatever, it doesn't mean they have become the leader. I always say there's two stages of growth, in it's one is this is self-awareness and rising yourself to higher levels of development.
Anybody else have anything to share? Okay, Nancy says, Amy, I struggle to determine my goals and ambitions also, and I'm 58. Yeah, it's not easy. Mandy, who is on this call, I'm not going to ask her to get into her story, but she also shared some stuff with me, and I think once we plan our next series and 3-part, we're going to tap into some of the stuff she said. But Mandy, if you wanted to sort of chime in, I'd love your feedback.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed today, and I will be sharing some of my story in our next series. So what Jesse and I are really going to focus on, and just a high level overview, is really leadership, and really making it safe, not only breaking the stigma of talking about things and mental health and things that we struggle with daily as employees, but as leadership, and managing that below and up and in between, and kind of going forward with there and breaking that stigma. And then how do you manage that, and some different tools and things as we go through. So that's just some high level without going too much, but I'm excited, and I really enjoyed today. Very helpful tools in there. So I am still chiming in with Amy, finding that even at 45, I think I'm learning this stuff for the first time in my life. And it seems like even though we are aware of it, or maybe we've known about it, or we've talked about it, or even as leaders, we've shared about it and even gone to other trainings and classes and spoke on it, but there's a different level of understanding, I think, and you reach a different level of your life. And I find for myself, reflecting back, that everything has a different meaning. And I seem to go to this new level, and it's like, okay, now I'm at the point in my life where I'm 45, and at home it's just me and my husband, and my kids are grown, and all of a sudden you can look at yourself and how you manage in this world, and it's like, oh, I can ask myself these things, like, what do I want to do when I grow up?
Yeah,
I mean, it's just so amazing.
I know. And I want to speak to the younger, like, I wish I could tell my younger me that, like, have the confidence and feel, and maybe that's just, it is what it is, you just grow into that feeling. But I just, especially this past year, I just feel like I'm embracing it more, where I'm like, wait a second, I don't want to do that. And it's okay if I say no, and I don't need to go to that party, or I don't need to, do whatever plans that everybody wants me to do, or whatever the case may be, and feel okay about it, and not have the guilt or feel bad, or like people are going to get mad at me. It's like, no, I'm fine with it. This is me. This is what I want, and you do you, and I'll do me. But it's like, why did it take so long? And I'm not even 100% there at all by any means. But
oh no, I keep asking things like, is that okay? Like, I'm putting out my boundary, but then I find myself, is that really okay? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, are you sure? There's like no surprises, right? Like, we're really okay. And so it's like, I just keep waiting for that. Oh my God, Mandy actually had a boundary and said no to something. And you know what? It is okay. And life has continued on. It's a new thing.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Well, if there's any younger ones on this call, youngins, I don't know, anybody younger than me, which is a lot, just know that if you're not there now, hopefully you'll get there eventually. But doing these things and listening to Shirley and really, like, thinking about the stuff that she said today and in the past, it just makes so much sense if you put it all together and really do the work. It totally makes sense. So Shirley, I really appreciate you, and the past sessions that you've provided to TMC. And to everyone on the call, Shirley is available. Like she said, I'll give you her contact information. We can give the slides. If you want to see any of the past sessions that she's done, they're all on our YouTube channel. I'll drop that in the chat. And Mandy and Jesse are going to be spearheading the next 3 sessions. She gave you a little bit of a preview as to what we're focusing on, but I will certainly reach out to all of you via email with the link to the next one. Actually, I'll put it in there. I haven't named it yet because we're still working on it, but please sign up. And even if you can't make it, you'll get a copy of the recording and the follow-up email and everything that we talked about. So go ahead and sign up. I will put that in the chat right now. And then, like I said, also everything in the past can be accessed via TMC's YouTube channel, which is right here. So with that said, Shirley, I hope you get some rest. I know you said you're working on something else now, but also if you have an organization, guys, if you are a leader and you want or like what you hear from Shirley, and would like to bring her in to talk to your employees or do a session for, if you think that would be helpful, if any of these sessions have been helpful, like she said, she's trained in a gazillion different things with regards to mental health, and she's familiar with the mortgage industry. And so she sort of is a perfect fit for these kind of conversations. So please reach out to her and set something up, because I guarantee it's well worth it. Anybody have any questions before we say goodbye?
I just want to say thank you to everyone. I have really enjoyed this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Shirley. It's been such a pleasure. And I'm sure we're going to have her back. I mean, she's not going anywhere. I keep her on speed dial. It's like my personal therapy session. I hope everybody has a great rest of their Monday and a great week. And we'll see you next month. Sign up for next month's session. Bye, guys. Hi, Paige.
Bye. Thank you.